If you burn easily in the sun, your skin might be telling you something about your gut and your hormones. Let's talk about the hidden link between digestion, energy, and fertility after 35. So, welcome back. I'm Dr. Anjali, founder of Back in Balance. And this month, we're going to be exploring the functional side of health, your gut, your hormones, and your nutrition. So, last month was all about structure, your posture, alignment, and sleep position. And this month, we're talking about moving inside the body from where the structure feeds its information to and where the brain gets its information from. We're going to start with something that I hear all the time in my practice, which is, why am I so tired all the time? Because you might be eating relatively healthy and you're taking your supplements and your labs, your blood work have come back, quote unquote, normal, but your energy is just tanked. And sometimes the first signs don't show up in your stomach at all. And in fact, they show up on your skin because sometimes we just get used to how our stomach is functioning. So today we're going to be asking, why does your skin react to the sun more than it used to? And why do rashes or flare ups appear when you're stressed? And how is this all connected to your gut, your hormones, and your energy, particularly after the age of 35? Let me just share a quick story because years ago, I had a practice member, we'll call her Sarah, who came in really frustrated because every summer she would be so sensitive to the sun and she would start burning within minutes of being outside. She said, I used to tan so easily when I was in my 20s. And now in my late 30s, I can't go outside without feeling inflamed. So she'd have to cover up. She just really couldn't be in the sun for extended periods of time. And so she, like many people, just assumed that she was just getting older, right? We tend to think of age as that magical tipping point when all the things start to happen. But what we found out when we dug deeper was that her gut just wasn't absorbing fats properly. And so that meant that she was really low in her fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and K. And these are the exact nutrients that actually protect our skin from things like oxidative stress. And they help us repair our tissue and stabilize our hormones. So her skin wasn't the problem. It was really just the messenger that there was something that needed to be addressed. Let's break this down a little bit because when you eat food like healthy fats, such as maybe avocados or nuts or olive oil or fish, your body doesn't just absorb them automatically. You need enzymes and you need stomach acid. You need bile from your liver and your gallbladder and enzymes from the stomach, the pancreas, and the gallbladder to actually break those down. So, after the age of 35, a lot of us start to have decreased stomach acid. And this could either be from stress. Remember, there is all kinds of stress. It's not just mental, emotional. It could also be from medications. Like if you are used to taking PPIs or antacids, that will slow down your digestion. We'll talk more about that. It could be if you have sluggish bile flow. This could be from maybe a sedentary lifestyle, or if you're eating a lot of processed foods, or if you're navigating a lot of hormonal shifts. And this could be also from less efficient pancreatic enzyme output. We'll talk about that more as well. So, if any of these steps falter, then it makes it more challenging to break down the fats. And if you're not breaking down fats, you're not really absorbing the fat soluble vitamins. So, maybe you're supplementing vitamin D, or vitamin D was low on blood work. But if we're not breaking down the fats, then just taking a supplement doesn't make it really beneficial or as beneficial to the body as hoped for. But let's talk a little bit about what the different fat soluble vitamins look like. So vitamin D, a lot of people talk about it as the sun vitamin, right? Because it is essential for our immune health, for our fertility, and our mood. And vitamin A, we need this for our cervical mucus health. We need it for skin repair and for our vision. And vitamin E, this is a great hormone stabilizer and antioxidant. And vitamin K is really, really critical for bone density and for blood clotting. So, yes, when digestion is off, our hormones, our skin, and our energy can all take a hit. So, here are some ways to maybe spot fat absorption or digestion challenges without running the labs. Perhaps you notice that you have an aversion, or maybe you crave the rich or the more fatty foods. Maybe you notice a tendency towards constipation, which is technically less than one bowel movement in a day. Or you might notice headaches. Perhaps you've been told that you have high cholesterol, or you've been diagnosed with diabetes or high blood pressure. Perhaps you're noticing increased weight gain, even though you might not be eating very much food, or you might not have had significant changes in your food intake or your activity level. You might be noticing that you have consistently high sugar cravings. Or one of the really key telltale signs of perhaps having trouble breaking down fat or absorbing it is if you notice that you have dry skin and hair, right? We're talking about skin sensitivity. It can also show up in your hair. If you have dry hair or hair that's falling out in larger chunks than you would like. And skin can be things like eczema, acne, or burning easily in the sun, right? Because the skin is like the external reflection of what our gut looks like. So a lot of times we get used to things like constipation or the headaches or maybe even the thinning of hair, and we don't necessarily associate it. But then when it starts to show up on our skin, we say, oh, I have symptoms of eczema, or I'm noticing that I get a lot of acne, or that I burn really easily in the sun. It could be even things like noticing that your stools are floating, right? I know we don't talk about digestion nearly enough in day-to-day conversation, but floating stools, if you ever look at what your bowel movements are doing after you've had a bowel movement, do you notice if your stools are floating? Or it could be that you're noticing more types of hormonal imbalances. Maybe you have increased PMS symptoms, or you're having irregular cycles, or maybe labeling it as perimenopause, or perhaps even menopause. Or, like we talked about, it's just that you might have really low energy and it's just not making sense. Here's why this matters so much, particularly after the age of 35, because your body is already navigating hormonal shifts, right? Estrogen, progesterone, and cortisol. All of these hormones can impact and affect your bile flow, your levels of stomach acid, and can influence your microbiome balance. So, if you add in the stress of parenting or work or trying to conceive, your digestion becomes one of the first systems to downregulate, right? We talked about when we're under stress, if that's fight or flight or freeze, whatever that sympathetic response is to stress, if our body is in that state of being, much of the time, our focus is no longer on digesting the food. The focus is sending resources to our arms, to our legs, so that we can fight, flight, freeze, do whatever we need to do. But all of our core function starts to get put on the back burner. So when we are in chronic stress, even if you're eating all the good things, if you are feeling chronically stressed, it can make it really challenging for your body to actually absorb those nutrients and to process it. So remember, our bodies don't change overnight, right? They're incredible at adapting and compensating. But our ability to process stress and nutrition just becomes more sensitive, more challenged. And the gut is really the front line for that. Because again, we're dealing with chronic stress, attempts at adapting and compensating. So, what can you do about it? Here are a few functional resets that you can start this week. So, one would be to consider having some bitter foods before you eat your meals. This could look like having arugula or dandelion, or even putting a squeeze of lemon in your water. This can really help to stimulate bile flow and get your stomach acid moving. The bitter receptors in our tongue sometimes get desensitized a little bit, or they don't get as activated because we don't tend to eat a lot of bitter foods, especially in the typical US American diet. There isn't a lot of bitter foods to activate those receptors. So having some bitters can activate that in our tongue, get those enzymes working, get the bile flow and stomach acid starting to get activated before we even start to eat. Another thing, like you might have been told as a child, you might be telling your own children, is to slow down and chew your food really well. So, chewing is actually what allows for digestion to start occurring in your mouth because the saliva starts to coat all of the particles of food. So, the better you chew, ideally about 32 times, the more you chew, the more it allows the saliva to coat the particles, and the less work your stomach has to do, the less work your gallbladder, your liver has to work. It just makes the whole process a whole lot easier. So, whether that means putting your fork down in between bites, whether that means trying to be really present as you're eating and focusing on your chewing rather than being a little bit mindless while eating and focusing on something else, really paying attention to how well you chew. It should ideally take at least 10 minutes to eat a meal. I would say closer to 15 if possible, but at least 10 minutes to actually chew your food and eat your meal. Along with chewing and movement in your mouth, I would consider movement after your meals. So, whether that means taking a short walk or doing some light stretching, this can also help stimulate bile flow and nutrient absorption. And then looking at your microbiome, right? So, this might be trying to incorporate more fermented foods or probiotics. If you generally have a healthy gut and we're trying to maintain it, I feel like probiotics can be a really good way of maintaining gut health. But or especially if you've had antibiotics, right? We want to replenish the good gut bacteria. And so we want to have the probiotics there. I love talking about hydration. You probably know this if you've seen any of my videos, but having hydration, improved hydration, adding some minerals to our water can really help to stimulate better bile flow and make it easier to digest our foods because dehydration can really thicken that bile and it can make it harder to digest fat. So these are not overnight fixes, but my goal would be that within a week or two, maybe 3 weeks, that you would start to notice that you have improved gut health, whether that's less bloating, better skin, and maybe perhaps more importantly for many of you is having more stable energy. So here's the takeaway. If your skin has been talking to you, it's not about your vanity. It's your body's way of actually saying, hey, the inside isn't working the way that it used to. Gut health, particularly after the age of 35, is about more than digestion. It's really the gateway to hormone balance, fertility, sleep, and resilience. So if you want to dive in deeper, I've created the Functional Resilience Guide, which includes a gut reset checklist and nutrition swaps that you can start right away. The link is below. And if you're looking for personalized guidance and customized recommendations, schedule a complimentary 15-minute discovery call so that we can better support you on your journey. Because when your gut is supported, your whole body feels safer. And when your whole body feels safer, everything, whether it's your skin, your sleep, or your energy, it starts to regulate better. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week as we talk about hormones and sleep and why 8 hours might not always be enough.